Welcome to another episode of Inquiring Minds. I am Steve Harper, and with me, as always, is my amazing co-host, Donna Carlin. Donna, how are you today?
I'm great, thank you. And how are you doing?
I'm fantastic. Anytime I get an opportunity to talk to you, it becomes a fantastic day just automatically. So I'm, I'm
Right back
excited to
at
be
you,
here.
mister. Yeah.
It's true. It's 100% true. Yesterday, not so good. Tomorrow won't be nearly as great because I'm not talking to you.
Oh,
So,
don't preact. We will see. We will
so
see.
what are we talking about today?
So, in doing some work with a colleague of mine, there was a question that we read about. Certainly, we didn't speak to him directly. That was asked Bill Murray, what's the secret to having a successful, fulfilled life?
Ooh.
An interesting question to ask somebody like Bill Murray, right? And his answer was phenomenal. The secret is to have a sense of yourself, your real self, your unique self, not just once in a while or once a day, but all through the day, the week, through life. I love that.
Yeah,
I
I do too.
absolutely love that. So I thought we would talk about that today because how often do we try to emulate somebody else or be somebody that we're really not, and struggle with our unique authentic self and the persona that we're supposed to have in the field of practice that we're in.
Yeah.
There's so many tensions and um, difficulties, struggles really within ourselves that I think that is a brilliant remark. Just be you, that old saying, just be
Yeah.
you. Why be somebody else? Why try to be somebody else? The world needs you.
Yeah.
And the question that came to my mind, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. Are you comfortable enough in your own skin to be yourself? Are you comfortable enough to just be and not have to be somebody else or some kind of persona? Like, I would really love to hear your thoughts on that because I think this is an important conversation to have.
I agree. I would say that not always would be my answer. I haven't always felt that comfortable. I think a lot of people lack a certain self confidence when they're in certain situations or around certain people, and they feel like they have to alter or adjust in order to validate why they're there, or why they should be listened to, or why they have something of value to contribute. And I think at the end of the day, I think a lot of people put on these, I call them airs. They put on airs to sort of live up to a certain level of expectation that they have thought of, that this, in order to be recognized by someone else or a group of other people, that you have to do certain things in order to, to do that. And what I've actually found, for my own personal life, I did that for a long time, and I felt very incongruent, and I felt inauthentic when I did it. You can't feel good trying to be somebody or something that you're not, and that's the big challenge. And yet people, often fall into that trap, feeling they have to adapt and do these things in order to be accepted. And so I reached a point in my life and my career where I was fortunate enough to stop and ask this question: Am I doing it because I have to do it, or because I think that I need to do it? And what was interesting about that was much of what I thought or perceived other people would look at, or how they would perceive or judge me. Much of that was very much like a story my brain was telling me that had no basis of validation. There was no truth
Mm.
to it, because I really hadn't actually, really had any true evidence that that was the case. And I do remember, and actually, I have to credit you a little bit on this, because you actually were one of the first people that had a very successful trajectory with your career path. When you and I got together, I felt so insecure about where I was and what I was doing at the time, and what my contribution to the world might be. Like, this is just a little tiny thing in comparison to the great work that you were doing. And what you were really great about doing is actually pulling out from me why I was passionate about what I did. You sort of sprinkled why you were passionate about what you did at the time, and we were able to meet each other at an equal footing. Whereas you think a lot of times you run into people who are so successful or have gone, to different heights than maybe you have with your own career. Not everybody often stops to do that, and I think they're waiting for you to catch up to them and sort of say, hey, look, this is great stuff you've done too, sort of on equal footing kind of deal. But oftentimes what that does is come across as braggadocious, or like they're better than you. And I find that that's when people start to retreat to the shell, or put on the different hats to try and gussy themselves up a little bit differently, to keep their seat at the table, to be respected and admired, which means that you're deviating out of your lane of truism. And that I see a lot. And I think it's the earlier or the more aligned you can be with who you are, and get comfortable saying, hey, look, I'm not everybody's cup of tea. I've heard you say that many times, right? I'm not for everyone, and that's okay. But the ones that I am for, those are the ones I want to spend my time and energy on. And I think, if kids could actually learn this coming out of school, that this isn't a popularity contest. There is no contest, right? At the end of the day, the people that probably are succeeding in life and are more fulfilled with their life are the ones that are more consistent with who they are at their core. And when you can, recognize that freedom to be yourself, then all that weight and all that muckety muck that comes with trying to, be something that you're not, it just goes away, and it's tremendously freeing.
Apropos to what you said about, when we first met, remember I had a head start on you
Yeah.
of years.
Yeah.
So you learn as you go. That's the first thing. The second thing is
So
I'm
how is it that
always,
you're getting younger and I'm getting older? I don't know
yeah,
how
yeah,
that
yeah.
worked. Sorry, I just had to throw
It's
that in
yeah,
there, but it's
that's a
true.
triple hockey puck throw.
Hmm.
Um, I just look at what works. As strange as this might sound, I used to write an insight journal every night. Insights about what happened, my approach to things, what triggered me, what was what excited me, all of that. The insight journal was really cool. It wasn't just a journal to write; it was a journal to observe.
Hmm.
Okay, and what was really fascinating for me was looking at what worked. What always works is when you're true to yourself, when you're interacting with somebody else. Because whether or not they're savvy when it comes to understanding people, they know when it's an act, they know when you're trying to be what you're not, and they know when you are who you are.
Yeah.
That's what creates the connection. I'm always fascinated about people and what their drivers are and what they've learned and their background and how it contributes to their present and all of that. I'm fascinated with people because every
Yeah.
single person in this world has some life experience that I will never have. I can't wait to hear their stories
Yeah.
and helping people see the magic that they bring to the world is an honor and a privilege for me to be able to do that. Um, I always saw this spark of energy in you that you were so busy telling me why you weren't doing something or not as good as you should be that you didn't recognize the fact that you bring this spark of energy to the table.
Yeah.
And I'm experiencing that in your Ripple and the wonderful platforms you're putting together and the conversations you're starting. This is an extension of who you are, Steve.
Yeah. Yeah.
And when I say you're the king of Ripple, I'm not joking. You are the king of Ripple. I
Thank you.
connect the dots, you connect people.
Yeah.
And that's why we get along so well, I think,
Yep.
because we bring two different perspectives to the table to hopefully positively impact people. So, I look at, do you really have a sense of yourself? Are you so busy trying to be like somebody else that you're losing yourself?
Yeah.
That's where you're going to, I hope not fail, but struggle when you try to park yourself and steer your personality and your approach in a way that's not natural to who you are.
Yep.
So when, that's what that insight journal did for me. It showed me this was my immediate thought about this situation. This is where my temper flared. And who was I really angry at? The other person or me?
Yeah.
In how I responded. And I would write about that, and it would be this great thing to look back at a year later, apropos to the show we did last week.
Yep.
Reflection of a year later. How far have you come? You're going to see that if you do an insight journal or have a conversation with somebody who's known you for years. They're going to be able to tell you how far you've come. And I would invite you to have those conversations. They're important.
Well, and it's really interesting. It's sort of invigorating when you actually can have those conversations, especially with someone that, saw you where you were and where you've come from. And like you said, apropos to last week's episode, where you're kind of taking the time to celebrate all that you've accomplished, or where what obstacles you've overcome, what you've learned, the challenges that you were able to push beyond. Those things are really valuable. I encourage everybody to go back and listen to that episode because we had some really great nuggets in it. But at the end of the day, it also helps to get that perspective from other people and for them to see or reflect on where you were in comparison to what they see now. I just had a really good friend that really hadn't talked to me or seen me in gosh, probably 12 to 12 or 13 years, and I was still very new at this whole Ripple process, and they got an opportunity to see me speak and present on the concept that where I focus my energy and my effort around this concept about connection and building relationships the right way, and how essential and critical it is to today's society and to our work. And he said, I was just blown away, because back then it was like, well, this is important. And, at the time, he actually made a really astute kind of observation. I kind of implied that because I'm introverted and shy, I was only serving that sliver of market. And now I've been able to say, look, whether you're introverted and shy, it's not a crutch. You have to overcome it, because unless you're lucky enough to live in a vacuum, you have to interact with people. And so the better that you can get at doing that, the more successful you'll be. Sure, it's going to be tiring if you're introverted and shy. It's a challenge, but you got to overcome that fear. But even the extroverts who don't realize that they aren't taking the time to stop and recognize how they build relationships, whether they're actually connecting, whether there's an authenticity there in that approach. So he said, I just could not believe that you were like, hey, look, this is needed and necessary by every single person, and how confident I got in that message, in that approach. And so it was extremely enlightening for me, because I could go back and, back to last week's episode, really reflect on just how far I've come and just how confident I am in the message. And so it could be a world leader that I'm talking to. It could be a, head of a major corporation or a startup entrepreneur. I know what I have and what value I bring. And so it's easy for me to relate it regardless of where you are in your stature of your career, your life. And so those things I think are super important. And before, I think I may have adapted by audience. I might have felt like I had to say it one way or approach it a different way. Now it's like, hey, this is what you get. You get what you get. Don't throw a fit. But we're going to learn to ripple together. And I don't care where you are. I'll meet you where you're at.
It's really interesting. This past weekend, I had I came across this series of questions to ask your spouse, and I thought it'd be really cool to do it after breakfast. So I said to Ray, "Okay, I have a bunch of questions to ask you," which I know that he just loves. She said sarcastically. I mean, he's an introvert, right? And I am certainly not an introvert. So one of the questions, it was curious. What are you jealous of, or what do you envy about me? And we asked this to each other. And he immediately answered. He said, your ability to connect with people anywhere, anytime, no matter what.
Yep.
It's just, you just walk up to people and you start a conversation, and they're your friend before, 5 minutes is up. And they want to be able to reach out and speak to you again. He
That's
says, I've
awesome.
never seen anything like it, because he is an introvert. And he said, I just watch in awe. It's unreal. But that's who I am. It's
Yeah.
not who he is. And he also will join in the conversation in his way at his time
Yep.
with his energy. And I said, sometimes that's necessary. You help people slow down to the speed of conscious thought.
Yeah. Oh, that's
And
great.
sometimes that pause or that, gentle introduction into the conversation is what they need.
Yep.
Doesn't mean I'm not going to get it if I figure out that they're reticent to continue the conversation. I'll just thank them, wish them a good day, and that's it. Whereas he will have a different approach, and he'll be able to connect at a different level, different way. So I really think that that goes to really understanding who we are all the time.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, like Bill Murray said, you find that comfort in it, and once you get there, I default back to sort of something you've said before. People are either going to like you or they're not. But that's their problem. You've said it before, and I've adapted this. In fact, I used it for a client the other day. um, you know, the opinion that they hold of you is none of your business.
Yeah, what somebody
And
else thinks
so,
of me is none of my business.
yeah.
That's
And so the
one of my
neat thing
mottos.
about that is, it really doesn't matter how they respond or react. I mean, obviously, in certain circumstances, you're looking for an outcome. You want people to come to the table and be open to whatever it is that you're sharing, or be at least willing to listen to what you have. But at the end of the day, when you actually feel like you have to put on this suit of armor to go into battle, or you have to put on a costume in order to play a role, or you just feel like you have to change your personality significantly to adjust for how this person may or may not accept you. I think that's the problem, for our audience. If you are doing that and you feel compelled to change on that level to gain acceptance, then you really need to look at that, and you really need to say, is this the right person I need in my life? Maybe you don't have a choice. Maybe it's a coworker, maybe it's a manager or a leader that you're having to interact with, maybe an important client. But I've also found, and this is something I recently shared with a client as well, is that when you feel like you're backed into a corner and you have to adjust or adapt in order to gain acceptance, that says more about you than it does the other person. And so one way that you can tackle that is, every time we get together, Donna, you make me feel, I don't think it's intentional, but I feel like I'm on my back foot. I feel like I am on the defensive, or I have to come to this conversation with a certain level of expertise that I'm not comfortable with. And I don't know if you recognize it. However, this is something that really gives me a sense of anxiety. And I'm not sure that's what you're looking for. You might actually find that alone, just addressing why you're adapting or adjusting how you respond or react to this individual, may never have been in a million years how that other person thought, right? It's like, oh my God, no, I can't believe that. You might have some people like, yeah, you have to bring your A game. I don't know, but that's your problem, not mine. But they're very comfortable in their skin, I guess, at that juncture. But at the end of the day, I think actually putting it on the table and saying, look, this isn't what works for me. And I feel like I am adjusting or adapting, and I'm not bringing my best part of myself to the table, to this conversation, to this meeting, to this project, whatever it might be. And I want you to try and help me work through this and see if we can find some common ground to, co-collaborate here. But, I'm ending that. I'm not going to do that anymore.
It's so I hope I don't make you feel too uncomfortable.
Oh, you
The
don't.
way
No,
I,
I'm using that as an example.
okay, just clarifying.
It wasn't you. It was not you. I'm just using it as an example. Yeah.
I have to make sure, and I'm not saying this to be cocky.
Yeah.
I have to make sure that I don't intimidate people because of some of the people I work with, my history, the amount of years that I've been doing this work. Sometimes people feel intimidated in a way because they're going to have to come to the table, and what is she going to think of me? What am I going to say that's going to be putting my foot in my mouth, kind of thing. And truthfully, I think people bring the A game that they can at any point in time. I don't think people come to any conversation, any meeting with the express intention of being their worst selves. I mean, seriously, here. I think that they come to the table with what they've got and the best that they've got at that time. And if they're dealing with other issues or whatever else, that so they're not 100% present, they're still bringing the best self that they could bring at that point in time. And we need to create the container that they could do that or do something or bring something. And one client that I've been working with on and off, I adore this guy. Like, he's just a riot to work with. Okay. Very senior person in the organization. This is the second organization I'm working with him in. And like, he used to say, you would walk through the door and I'd get a headache. It was so funny, and I go, thank you, like,
Yeah.
thanks heaps.
Uh,
He says, because I know you're going to make me think more than I usually think, and I'm going to be viewing things from multiple perspectives, and by the end of the day I'm going to have a giant headache. So he says, but that's a good thing. And I'm going, not so sure that's a good thing. He says, you make me want to be so present. You make me want to be my best self, just by virtue of you supporting whatever it is I'm going to do. And I say, this is the only relationship in your life, a coaching relationship, where that coach is 100% there for you. You're not going to get that in your relationships by your
yeah.
kids. They're going to judge you at some point. Your boss is going to judge you at some point. Doesn't matter. That coach is there to support you 100% and not judge you. Where do you get that in life?
Yeah.
So in return, he
Hmm.
wants to be his best self to honor that. And I think that that is a really cool way of looking at things.
Well, I mean, one perspective though, I'd say I'm glad he said that to you, because if he didn't say it to you, you wouldn't know, right? And at the end of the
Mhm.
day, it's actually a really, and it kind of goes back to my point where if you just lay your cards on the table, even with those that are intimidating to you, like, hey, I don't know what it is about you or why this happens when we interact or we have a conversation, or I feel like, uh, we're communicating in a joint meeting together. I feel intimidated, or I feel like I'm having to adapt or change. Just the fact that you could bring that on and put that in front of the other person, I think, has a huge value. I agree that people don't a lot of times don't intentionally come, like they're the foremost authority or the expert at the table. They don't anticipate necessarily doing it. I was just thinking back to a client, for my software company, a guy that I've called on for a lot of years finally agreed to do business. And I called him and I said, I just want to thank you for the opportunity to work with you, the confidence you're placing in us and in working with you going forward on the software. And he said, well, great. He goes, you've been always great about, following up, and, I'm glad it finally worked out and we could finally make it happen. And I raised it to him that I said, I'm glad. And he goes, I really like, what you do and how you do it. And I said, I'm really glad to hear that. And I'll tell you why, because every single time we talked, I felt like you could care less or didn't really, didn't, you weren't, exactly thrilled in our conversations. You're a pretty intimidating guy. And that was my line. And he said, "Oh my gosh, I never expected, I didn't intend to come across as intimidating." And I said, "Well, your position and your authority and what we were trying to do together, certainly it's more of my story than it is yours, right?" And this entire relationship turned on a dime. Like, he all of a sudden became this big teddy bear kind of guy, and very friendly. And it was Mr. Harper this, Mr. Harper that, and all of a sudden it was Steve, and call me up. Hey, I don't know if you need to know this, but these other guys are about to make a move on some software. You ought to call them and tell them I told you to call them. And, this whole thing. But I don't think we ever would have got there if I actually hadn't acknowledged the, sort of this elephant in the room, and kind of going back to where we started, which is not putting on a version of yourself that isn't consistent with who you want to be and who you want to represent. I think is really important. And I think, if anybody has, a takeaway from this episode is, make sure you're not altering yourself so much that you lose sight of who you are, in order to get someone else to like you or to agree to do business with you, or, to be nothing but the best possible presence you can in your conversations and interactions.
Definitely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Just be yourself. Be
Be
yourself.
yourself.
That's attractive in itself. We
Yeah.
are so used to people putting on, their game face and their salesperson's face and
Yeah.
all this kind of stuff that we don't know which is real and what isn't. And when you get that reality, that authenticity, it is so attractive. You want
Yep.
more of it. Just be
Absolutely.
yourself. Yep.
Absolutely. Well, Donna, this has been another great conversation. We ran a little bit long on this one, but it's an important topic. I think it's really important that people look at this and spend some time with this. And so I'd love to hear. We would both love to hear from you as our audience. Whether you're listening on the podcast platforms or you're seeing this video on YouTube or Facebook. What you took away from this, and sort of what your perception of this. And, as we like to remind you, take this conversation forward, use it at the dinner table, have these conversations with your team or with your important clients and prospects, because they will appreciate you for it. It's an opportunity for you to, give a little bit of insight into what you're picking up out there with this kind of content, these kinds of conversations. You never know where they'll lead, but they'll always lead somewhere interesting. That's for sure. So, Donna, how can people get in touch with us?
Best way is to join our Facebook group, Inquiring Minds with Donna Carlin and Steve Harper. You could get us through our websites, ripplecentral.com for the King of Ripples, and I'm at donnacarlin.com, Carlin with a K. And let us know, like on any of the platforms, what you'd like us to discuss or what this did for you. And as a comical aside, I get recommendations for podcasts all the time. And in my email, I see this from Audible, sorry, that you,
Yeah.
you might want to check out this podcast. And I look and it's Inquiring Minds with Donna Carlin and Steve Harper, and I'm cracking up going, I know that one.
Yeah,
That one I
yeah,
know.
yeah,
And
yeah.
so, yeah, sign up to be actually notified when we publish a new one. All
Absolutely,
of them
absolutely.
that were on the Facebook platforms, you get us there as well.
Absolutely. And just because you're hearing this as a present episode doesn't mean that we wouldn't be thrilled to hear from you on a prior episode if it raises something that you want to have a conversation with. I mean, we're quickly moving towards 100 episodes, and so that's a lot of great content, a lot of great information. But we would love to talk about any of those episodes in more in depth. Or if you see or hear something that you're like, hey, I wish you guys would have dug into this a little bit more, or could you do a follow up episode for a topic that really resonated with you? We'd be happy to do it. So let us hear from you for sure. Well, Donna, you have a great, amazing rest of your day. Thanks for the, making this the highlight of mine, and hope you have a fantastic, not only rest of the day, but the rest of your week.
You too.